Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the viewers, participants, and speakers, and thank you for joining us at this conference. My name is Arilina. I'm a coordinator of Social Action Department of the United Nations Association of Argentina, an advisor on matters of worship, interfaith, and religious freedom of the Secretary of Worship of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Commerce of Work and Worship. I'm also Secretary of Educational Affairs of the NGO Instituto Islam para la Paz. It's my pleasure to walk you through this session of the C20 and introduce you to today's speakers and topic. I want to highlight that we feel privileged to have so many participants and viewers from all over the world. First of all, I would like to open this session explaining what the Civil 20 is. This is an independent engagement group of the G20, and it's a global platform for civil society organizations in the G20 process, delivering civil society's demands to world leaders. The C20 community comprises more than 1,000 civil societies organizations from all the corners of the world, which we had been challenging the voices of civil societies into the G20 since 2013. As you all very well know, each year the C20 convenes voices to determine the policy solutions required to ensure sustainable and inclusive societies. Very well, today's panel is formed by Silvia Perazo, Nancy Falcon, and Arilina Gomez. I was 14 years old when I met Silvia Perazo during my first diplomatic simulation of the United Nations, also known United Nations Model or Model UN. Since then, my life has changed remarkably. United Nations simulations gave me the tools to develop myself as a young man trying to achieve his goals. Years later, seeking to reconnect with my ancestors' religion and culture, it was when I met Nancy Falcon during a course organized by Silvia Perazo. There, I understood that if you do not understand the culture and religion of your neighbor or the other people that you or your country may have a problem, it will never disappear and peace will never ensure. Our last panel member is Arilina Gomez from El Salvador. I met her just a few weeks ago, and I realized how difficult it is to deal with gangs and a violent society. But what I learned is how much each of us could contribute challenging that situation. With this introduction, I think this is the perfect panel for our topic: building global citizenship in Latin American youth, inclusive education practices for peace. We have to remember that Latin America is the most violent region on the planet due to the high crime rates, overpopulated cities, the lack of integration, all kinds of migration, economic inequalities, unemployment of young people, is the perfect scenario to create social violent behaviors that leads to stigmatization, discrimination, bullying, and grooming. However, CSOs and NGOs work day by day to eradicate practices that undermine social cohesion and favor daily violence. For this reason, the experts of this session will share with us different practices carried out by CSOs and NGOs through non-formal education youth programs in order to promote peace, justice, human rights, and cultural diversity in Latin America. Now, I'm going to explain the flow of the session. First, we are going to start with introductory remarks from each speaker. Then, the speakers are going to answer some specific questions regarding to the most important issues of the topic, and then they are going to answer questions from the audience. We encourage you to ask questions and post comments about the topic. You are welcome to do it in the chat box through the session or at the end. We will try to address as many as the time allows. Please mention your name and be as clear as possible. Without further ado, I would like to welcome our first presenter. Her name is Silvia Perazo. She has a master's degree on history from 3 de Febrero University, Argentina. She was selected at different universities from Argentina, where she teaches contemporary African history and contemporary armed conflicts. She is the author of different articles related to African issues. Currently, she is the president of the United Nations Association of Argentina, where she works on activities and projects related to educational matters. She will deliver a presentation entitled From Game to Peace. Silvia, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Karin, for your warm words. To me, it's a really pleasure to be here in the C20 and to share this conference with you, being in this panel. I'm not here for speaking about Africa. I am here for speaking about civil society and in the promotion, peace, and a culture of peace. So, as Karim has said, Latin America is the most violent region on our planet. It registered the 43 of the homicide in global terms. Only in 2017, around 464,000 people were victims of homicides, 5 times more than victims of armed conflicts, according to ONU-DC. This situation is due to the action of organized crime and gangs that we call pandillas in some different countries of Latin America, as same as the increase of common crime. Poverty, inequality, state neglect, and lack of opportunity are the main causes for this situation, but they have a strong relationship with the population growth, impunity, corruption, weakness of justice, and the easy access to weapons. All these conditions are a strong challenge for the state and civil society organization, and we must face them. Crime and international organized violence need an effective and urgent state intervention and the cooperation between states for fighting them. However, building a peaceful society requires action from the grassroots and the commitment of all. Building a peaceful society compels us to consider that peace means much more than the absence of war. Peace is the absence of violence. It is the absence of direct violence, which involves acts of war and insecurity. It is the absence of symbolic violence, which refers to cultural constructions that either directly or subliminally involve aggression against others. It is also the absence of structural violence, understood as the condition in a country that prevents our fellow citizens from living with dignity. And it also implies the absence of cultural violence, which is one that will stereotype, myths, and phobias that segregate, exclude, discriminate. Regardless of the inalienable role of the state, this concept of comprehensive peace is built through education and the active participation of the citizenship in everyday life, professional practices, civil society organization. There is no peace possible without everyone's commitment. Peace is a way of life, and this way of life is built each day through education, and inclusive and quality education. Inclusive and quality education should reach all social sectors, as well as urban and rural areas, and should favor the integration of children with different abilities, with different learning abilities, and with social problems. Inclusive and quality education should not only emphasize technological and academic knowledge, but also achieve everyone's commitment to significant community issues, both national and international. In this sense, inclusive and quality education can contribute to build a global citizenship. Building a global citizenship means raising awareness for global issues that affect peace regardless geographic, regional, culture where they arise. Building a global citizenship means, therefore, creating global solidarity that transcends borders. Racism, stigmatization, bullying, grooming, discrimination are shared problems that are exacerbated with poverty and lack of opportunities. From the base of society and from education, it's necessary to raise awareness and fight them. UNAR is a non-profit civil association mainly aimed at promoting education of peace and a culture of peace. We work with the certainty that civil society has a fundamental role to play in order to achieve a more peaceful world. The United Nations model and several simulation game is one of the projects promoted by UNAR with a view to show the large-scale global issues. With this, we seek to build knowledge, responsibility, and commitment regarding the issues that affect peace and our planet. With this, we seek to build knowledge, and with this simulation game constitute an educational strategy that encourages the exchange of role with a view to gain a deep understanding of other realities. This project highlights that all cultures deserve respect. In this sense, simulation games inspire a broader approach to each of the issues raised from the perspective of knowledge, respect, and commitment, in order to get a more comprehensive and inclusive proposal and solutions. Thanks, Karim. This is my introduction to our subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. And now let's welcome our second presenter. Her name is Nancy Falcom. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Buenos Aires University, Argentina, and is currently working toward a PhD in philosophy. She works as the executive director of the ALBA Intercultural Dialogue Center in Buenos Aires, dedicated to promoting intercultural dialogue through different cultures. As the result of her work, she has been lecturer about education in the United Nations and in the Pontifical Vatican Academy of Science. Nancy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karim. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here in the C20, sharing this panel with Silvia, with Arisbe, and with you, Karim, and also with the audience, some ideas about education, global citizenship in Latin American youth. These ideas come as a result of my daily work and experience as director of Centro de Diálogo Intercultural ALBA in Argentina since 2012 from now. I want first to introduce myself as a Muslim Argentinian woman, daughter and granddaughter of Muslim Syrian immigrants that came to Argentina in the 19th century, and they mixed their culture with the Argentinian custom in a harmonious way, resulting as a peaceful coexistence between both cultures, keeping their religion identity. So I think as a result of my mixed culture history of my family, I always want to dedicate my life working in intercultural dialogue and education. So I start to work with youth and intercultural education since 10 years ago as a part of a global movement of Muslims that addresses intercultural interfaith dialogue and education with youth all over the world. This movement called Hizmet. Hizmet is a word in Turkish language that means service, human service. And it's for nearly 20 years in Argentina. So, but focus is now in the topic that joined us today. I must say that, as Silvia says previously, in Latin America, social and economic inequality is a constant. So youth are the most vulnerable population, being seriously affected by unemployment and lack of access to quality education. According to the United Nations statistics, Latin America has socioeconomic disparities in access and completion of secondary and tertiary education. 10% of women between 15 and 19 are adolescent mothers, and this phenomenon is markedly more common among adolescents. Almost 15% of adolescents in the lowest quintile of the income distribution are mothers, compared with 4% of adolescents in the highest income quintile. So, as an example, a couple of weeks ago in my country, in Argentina, the National Institute of Statistics and Census, called INDEC, published the data of households and people below the poverty line. And the results of the first semester of this year, corresponding of the total of urban agglomerates, registered that almost 19 million of Argentinians are living now below the poverty line, and more of them are children and teenagers. I wonder, in this scenario, how we, the civil society, can build an education for peace. And I realize all that we need this education. In most of Argentinian public schools, in the poorest neighborhoods, children and young people not only go to school looking for education, but also for their only daily meal. School canteens guaranteeing the low-income children and youth have access to a portion of meal in a day. With the current COVID-19 crisis and school lockdown, we can imagine what the current situation is now for these young people and children. So, as a director of Intercultural Dialogue Center that work in non-formal education programs, I believe that education is the solution of the social, economic, environmental challenge worldwide. As I say before, in Latin America and all over the world, our movement, in partnership with small businessmen, raise funds to provide access and equity to quality education for the most disadvantaged and poor families as a responsibility and give back to the society. Our primary focus is to address the local needs of the society through education, because it is considered the one of the indication for sustainable peace and development. In Argentina, we currently have several programs that involve especially the youth, but I want to mention that all the program in which we work involves always one or more institutions that work in grassroots. We never do something alone, because we believe partnership and joint work are the best way to impact in the civil society. I can mention a lot of NGO like Anual, like Silvia is part, United Religion Initiative, Escolas Ocurrentes, is the foundation of Pope Francis, CAICID, Arisbe and me belong to the fellow program of this international institution who promote intercultural dialogue all over the world, and so on. Just to mention that work together is the best way to build an education for peace. So I can say a few things to remark about building a global citizenship in Latin America youth, and especially education for peace. First of all, there is a lot of NGOs that work in education, intercultural dialogue, youth. So as I say before, try to do your work with others. The impact in the civil society is so much more if you work together. Secondly, in the Latin American context, the priority of youth is to have, first of all, access to education. But what we really have to think about is what education are we teaching? What education are we teaching? What is the priority within the content of educational curricula? Is that education for peace important or not? Many times the urgent issues cover the important issues. So as a society, we own this debate about the importance of education for peace, because maybe later it will be too late for do that. Last but not least, we don't have to miss hope in change coming. Every single step in education for peace counts. Every action with youth has an impact in that children, in that young man or woman. We can change the future for good. There are many challenges and difficulties that we face in our everyday work, and I'm so excited to share with you some of them. So thank you, Karim. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. And now let's welcome our third presenter. Her name is Arilina Gomez. She's a Lutheran pastor in El Salvador member of the board of the Salvadorian Lutheran Synod, coordinator of the family pastoral care, which is focused on youth, and assistant to the bishop. During the 90s, she was involved in a project to learn about the reality of young people who belong to the gangs called Maras in prison, trying to understand the role of the church in the conflict. During 2014 to 2018, she participated actively in the initiative called The Paz, trying to seek answers to build peace in El Salvador and overcome the phenomenon of gangs. Currently, she's finding ways in which the church could be engaged in the peace and reconciliation process by promoting dialogue as the main tool. Arisbe is working to raise awareness about the historical commitment that the church has with peace and reconciliation in society based on the theology life. Arisbe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Karim. Hello, everybody. It is a really pleasure to be here in Spanish. I like to start my presentation by thanking the organizers, my panel matters, Silvia and Nancy, especially our moderator, Karim, and all of you to listen to us in this panel. Like Karim said, I am Arisbe Gomez, pastor of the Lutheran Church in El Salvador. Salvadoran working in the Salvadoran Lutheran Synod. My main duty is to coordinate the pastoral care of the family with focus in youth, children, and women. I am a woman, mother, professional, pastor, Christian pastor. I do my work from my faith. I believe in a just God, and I think it is our job to reflect the work of God's justice in us as person and society. I study the theology of life, which is based on giving special attention to those most in need, understanding that need is not only economic, but also refers to all human needs, all human needs throughout life, like ecological, social, political, gender, cultural, and spiritual dimension. I have a long work with youth since I was very young, working 11 years ago to create a center for reflection and dialogue. Then I participate in a dialogue processes with the churches in an initiative for peace called IPAS. And I had the opportunity to be trained by the International Dialogue Center, CAICID, on interreligious dialogue. Being young, I realized that the problems of the youth of my country are mostly the same of the neighboring countries. Learning about it, raising self-awareness, analyze and try to understand about all the problems that young people experience in my national and regional context, in order to know what I could and should do. The first answer that I found was that you cannot do much when you are young if you do not have enough training or maturity, because the lack and denial of the opportunities and the many limitations on social, economical, and political levels, also because the opportunities turn out to be dangerous if you question the system. Then what is left is to learn and build more capacities. Now that I am a young adult, it is when I understand that working on youth project is not working for them, but with them. Young people have a strong voice. They know their problems, and have important opinions. They act accordingly, and when they are not taken into account. When we don't listen, we are throwing the life of the future to total failure if as adults don't give them the tools and work with them in building a world of peace, appreciating them as knowledge and capacities and the needs stated by them. My country experiences many injustices. We do not listen to the divine voice that tells us, love to each other. We do injustice, not God, and that is why it is important that those of us who believe in God's divinity work to be better and do what we are supposed to do for the common good. And that is why in this panel, talking about the well-being and young people and how we can accompany them in their education and training is essential because working with them is building a better future. For decades, education of young people is a threat of my country because being young is the force for social change. After 30 years of the peace accord, being young is still a threat, and youth turn in a social issue because the lack of the opportunities make them to join gangs called maras. They get early pregnancies, and they are migrating massively to the North countries. Well, finally, I'm going to elaborate more about the three issues later in the development of the discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you, Karim. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Arife. And thank you, all of you, Nancy, Silvia, and Arife, for your presentations and such an interesting and informative topics that you've been talking about. Now let's move to the questions and answers session. First of all, I would like to ask all of you, I don't know if you would like to start, Sylvia, what can be done by NGOs and grassroots society to eradicate practices that undermine social cohesion? What are some examples of this?
Well, thank you, Karim, again. Well, the truth is that after listening Nancy and Arisbe, we can understand how important civil society and how necessary civil society is in our continent, in Latin America, because all of our problems. Well, for answering your question, I would like to share a presentation about our project. Let me see. So, as I have previously said, in UNAR, we organize different projects and activities to promote peace from the base of society. Because as Nancy said, peace is very important and is necessary for our continent. One of these projects in the simulation game strategy, which allows participants to take on of others, is the simulation game strategy. And with this project, through this project, we can simulate to be an artist, a diplomat, a superhero, a political decision maker, a sport decision maker. But also we can pretend to be a refugee, a migrant, a Muslim youth, a persecuted Christian, a Black discriminated child. And we can experience how they feel. Let me present to you one of the most popular examples of simulation game strategy, the United Nations model. Karim has mentioned it in his introduction. This project is one of the applications of role-playing and constitutes a simulation of the functioning of United Nations. Participants play the role of diplomats from the various states that make up the United Nations. As such, they must defend their position on various issues in the international agenda, Sessions are held following similar rules to those observed by diplomats within the United Nations system and the same ceremonial and protocol procedure that they use. Participants manage a diplomatic agenda that addresses international relevant issues and must propose concrete, real, and effective solutions. All participants should be especially trained for this activity. They should be informed about the country to be represented, political system, foreign policy, strengths and weaknesses, internal and external problems, etc. Besides, students must have a deep knowledge of the topic proposed for the debate and the position of the state regarding them. They are also required to have notions of international law, international policy, geopolitics, and international relations to know how to conduct themselves during the development of the activity. Likewise, negotiation and mediation tactics aimed at reaching consensus among irreconcilable positions are implemented in the United Nations Model Program. United Nations Model allows participants to enter the world of international relations through the simulation of United Nations sessions. This kind of role play focuses on dialogue and diplomacy as means to solve the various conflicts that may arise between states. It also offers the possibility to understand the role of this international organization that is in continuous search for solutions to common problems: extreme poverty, terrorism, environmental problems, organized crimes, refugees and migrants, among others. It also allows understanding between what is and what should be the role and the action of the United Nations in the international scene, thus encouraging debate, constructive criticism, and the taking of stances. The simulation game strategy can be applied to multiple initiatives. For example, religious leader summits may be simulated to foster interreligious dialogue as a strategy for the peaceful resolution of dispute. It may also be applied to meetings of sport committees such as the FIFA or the International Olympic Committee in order to delve into the major issues related to sports. Meeting of thinkers may also be simulated to reflect on transcendent questions of philosophy or the great current of thought. Simulation may even be applied to a supposed superhero meeting to discuss the ethical foundation of their actions. The possibilities are endless, and the results wonderful. As I previously said, the simulation game strategy allows participants to take on the role of fathers. It is an essential tool to get to know and value different cultures, religions, and ideas, as well as diverse political and economic perspectives. Role-playing as an experience-based activity favors understanding and empathy, thus contributing to the modification of behavior and action that lead to stigmatization, exclusion, prejudice, discrimination, and intolerance. In this sense, it contributes to the achievement of peace through the modification of violent behaviors. It helps to develop leadership skill and build consensus. It fosters integration and commitment to reality. It helps to identify shared stances and goals beyond any difference that may exist. It creates knowledge. UNI implement the United Nations model and the various simulation games with elementary and high school students, in our system primary and secondary school students, university students and professionals, in public and private schools, in rural and urban ones. Everyone can participate since topics and methodologies are adapted to different academic levels. And annual carry out these activities in Buenos Aires city, that is our capital city, but two in Posadas, in San Luis, in Gualeguay, and Ushuaia and Rio Grande in the end of the world, no? And always in Uruguay. This special year, with the coronavirus, we managed to organize two United Nations models by Zoom due to enthusiasm of the young people to participate. Well, this is one of the strategies implemented by UNR in order to eradicate violence from the base, from the grassroots of society. Thank you, Karim.
Thank you, Sylvia. Nancy, would you like to give you your opinion about this issue. What can be done by NGOs and grassroots society to eradicate practices that undermine social cohesion? And maybe an example of your experience?
Thank you, Karim. Of course, I just hear what the great job do Anwar in Argentina and Uruguay too, so in the region, and came to me that the importance to have the opportunity for the youth to experience that program, to understand what is going on in the world. I mean, the importance of what happened outside our country or our region or state. I mean, it's so important. So, and like Arisbe said previously, I think also the increase in youth violence is a critical topic in Latin America. Unfortunately, not in Argentina, but the violence is a constant in all the region. So the links between youth and violence are often related to economic crisis, the cleaning standard of living, lack of access to social mobility channels. So we in Centro Alba, we work intensively with youth, doing trainings, workshops in several schools of Buenos Aires, specifically, teaching the importance of intercultural dialogue as a way to learn about respect of different thinking and also create a new way to promote this social inclusion and cohesion in our society. As educators, the Centro Alba works together with an NGO called Escolas Ocurrentes. It's a foundation related to the Pope Francis. We are in the program that called Escolas Chairs, and the main objective of that program is to disseminate the ideas and pedagogical proposal in the realities of the different countries and continents. So we bring together a network with 100 universities all over the world and professors and so on. So when we start the program of education program, we implement the concept of the 4 C's for learning, which is communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And I saw this 4C also in what Silvia showed us today. So we work like this in every educational program. So I have an example of what we do in Argentina. I have a program, we have a program, not only ALBA, but with other institutions like United Religion Initiative, like Jewish Museum here in Buenos Aires, that called Bridge Builders. From 10 years from now, Bridge Builder is a project that promotes understanding between communities with different faith and cultural backgrounds. So 30 university-going youth from Argentina were selected year by year and get involved with dialogue and collaborative actions between different religion youth. I'm coordinating this program with 2 women. So we are 3 women educators, including myself, coordinating this program year after year, and 3 civil society organizations working together to make Bridge Builder this program a good program every year. The participants have the study opportunity as well as share action proposal. So that represents a concrete vehicles for desires change. But today we face the COVID-19 crisis, so we cannot join us in a camp or what we always done. But more than ever, we realize that we live in increasingly connected society where absolutely all human beings are engaged one with another, and if we don't cooperate each other between us, we will not succeed. So we must think and create more and new innovative educational option that can build inclusive global citizenship through education. Because of that, this year, Bridge Builder program is now a virtual training. It's so difficult to do that, but we do that. We think how to do in a virtual way this camp that we used to do. We are founded now by CAICID International Fellow Program, and we bring people, young people together from different cultural and religion traditions, not only Muslim, Jewish, and Christian, but also Buddhist, indigenous people, Sikh, from all over the Argentina. And now with the virtual way, there's a good thing. We incorporate participants from all over Latin America. So we have indigenous youth from Guatemala, Chile, Paraguay, and have joined this initiative together with Muslim and Buddhists from Spain, for example. So in the Bridge Builder virtual training this year, we're teaching universal values that share what we share for religion and cultural in order to stimulate the concept of global citizenship. We are all together as human beings, and also we share values that bring us together in peace. On the other hand, the young people who participate this year are trained by other young former bridge builders. In this way, we encourage those already experienced the program before to continue following the path of education for peace, because we see that every time the youth is ceasing to be a passive population in terms of change the status quo. So we have to take advantage in this point. I'm going to share a video, short video with you that illustrates the work that we did a couple of years ago with the vulnerable population in Buenos Aires. It's homeless, in this case, young people of different tradition and religion prepare and serve together a dinner for more than 100 homeless people from Buenos Aires, gathered in a church in the community of San Egidio. In the preparation of food, in serving those most in need, the young people became one in action. So I will share a quick video with you in order to show you what we do. just a quick video to show what we used to do when the COVID crisis was not. So we can work, cannot be seen the result immediately. But as a civil society, we must not lose hope of transforming society step by step. We cannot do it alone. We must work together for peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. And now, Aribel, what do you think that can be done by NGOs and grassroots society to eradicate practices that undermine social cohesion? And maybe you can share your experience and examples of this.
Thank you again, Karim. I think the promoting peace can be conducted by capacity building and historical sense of identity. We have to learn our history, our context, and cultures. The important thing is to learn from ourselves. It is the best way to unlearn what I'm not good, to replicate, and what does allow us to build new things and be able to build another way to be society. About the practices that undermine social cohesion, I want to share some photos because I have some examples. It's not possible to understand everything without see something. I want to share. Okay, in El Salvador, according to health records, since 2017, there are approximately 19,319 pregnant girls and adolescents per year, which is equivalent 53 pregnant girls and adolescents daily, which has also generated 500,000 cases of school dropouts nationwide. The total population of the country in El Salvador is 6,643,000, with the young population being 30% of the total population. Young people are trapped in dynamics of violence and abuse, which limit their well-being and highlight them as victims and perpetrators. From their reality as victims, women are the most affected by violence. I have the second example about the gangs called maras. With the phenomenon of gangs, maras, they are mainly linked to poverty, migration, and exclusion. We are migrant and dissatisfied people because of needs not covered. If we do not emigrate, we are thrown to violence and exclusion. But it must be recognized that the gangs are a post-war phenomenon, also to a North American culture, where they learned the organization and managed to build an organized mafia structure. With deportation from US, these young people came to El Salvador to set up gangs in the country. Two gangs are the most powerful, Barrio 18 and alluding to an avenue in Los Angeles, California, with that number 18, and the other, the Mara Salvatrucha, or MS 13. The two gangs have had huge development, expanding their structures in Central America and Mexico. Now they have been spread into substructures and territories. Governments for more than 20 years have promoted Iron Hand or Super Iron Hand plans, and finally, truces with the Maras. But even so, there is no solution. The Maras continue to strengthening with more than 70,000 members. Although it is suspected that they have reduced the murders this year, 2020, due to a governmental territorial control plan that the current president of the Republic of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, has activated, militarizing all sectors where there is a presence of gangs, isolating them within the prison in cabins with maximum protection and confinement to avoid maximum contact with the outside. He assumes that this method will cause the reduction of gangs, but we as a church realize that if the root causes are not considered, the gangs will be involving in more sophisticated structures. The presence of gangs in the territories continues with invisible controls and influence borders between them, imposing rules and conditions to enter in their territories. They do not mix or renounce being a member of a gang, because doing so is the penalty for death. The Mara survive economically through extortion, threatening life and murder those who do not pay the extortion imposed on them and having a small, medium, or large business in the territory belonging to the gang. Extortion continues to grow now in the COVID-19 pandemic. The impact of impoverishment has bring additional criminal structure and extortion that steal and assault also are involved in a drug trafficking that handle money and buys will of many sectors of society. This has increased and levels of insecurity and damage the economy. In this context, young people are recruited, creating different social and institutional problems, such as school dropout, lack of decent work, jail, debt, and exclusion. Finally, the third example is the migration. Migration is a phenomenon that has existed for decades, an increase in war-on periods or post-war periods. Now, there is a new migration phenomenon called Migrants Caravans, which are made up of thousands of people walking together to North America, caused by a period of economic and structural violence, worse than the Civil War in the 1980s. This phenomenon of migrant caravans began at the end of 1718 among the countries that make up the triangle of violence: Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, in which the vast majority are young people and children who compose them. People are fleeing from problems to which they cannot find solutions that motivate them to expose their lives, risking everything no matter what. These problems are violence and extortion, lack of opportunities for decent employment, and access to education. In the context of COVID-19 pandemic, 2 migrant caravans were organized. One on June 30, 2020, and another on October 1st, 2020. There was no pandemic that stopped them. although they had encountered barriers on the road at the borders of Guatemala and Mexico. This is our reality, and it is our challenge. Our generation of young people needs to be healthy and not contaminated by this phenomenon of injustice that only leads to death. Say this man called David. I am in the gangs because I don't know any other way to live. I grew up with this, and so I am protected. I belong to a family, said this young man, member of the Mara. Society has become so used to this that it is already normal. Seeing a pregnant girl or seeing a young Mara is normal. It's normalized, and you learn to live with this when we feel that there is no other alternative or solution. But there are solutions, but we must not leave governments alone to work for them. It is necessary to add civil society, NGOs, and most importantly, the churches and religions, because they are the ones that have direct contact with society, and it is through them. Those solutions must arrive as social proposals and work in coordination with governments. We have to discuss with the relevant sectors, build proposals, and make the whole of society listen to us to build peace, promoter, facilitating dialogues, to seek joint solutions without provoking more wars or violence. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, Arilina. Thank you so much. Well, now we have another question. What does the role that education play toward promoting peace in conflicts and non-conflict contexts? What are the challenges and difficulties of this educational practice? Sylvia, would you like to start with?
Yes, thank you, Karim. Well, the truth is that after listening Arisbe, we can't be indifferent. You know, we feel that we must act as civil society because it's terrible. And we must raise awareness about this subject, as Nancy says. But well, for answering your question, Karim, I will talk about education, but with focus in context where there is no direct violence, in context with structural and cultural violence, another kind of violence. In this situation, one of the greatest challenges is leaving no one behind, leaving no one behind. Because in this fourth industrial revolution, one of the biggest problems is the number of people who are left out of the process due to lack of knowledge, due to lack of education. And this situation is worsening, of course, with poverty. In this context, we need innovative projects that awaken curiosity of young people who have no interest in studies. In this sense, I can tell you our experience with 11 and 12-year-old children in a rural school in Entre Rios, where a few of them have access to high school because they have to work, or they prefer to work, or their parents prefer that they work. Furthermore, only some of them manage to finish their secondary studies if they go. After implementing of the United Nations model and grassroots strategy from the base of society, they have improved their performances in school. They have improved their writing and public speaking skills. Many of them have continued studying, and now we have the first university student in UVA in Buenos Aires. It is wonderful, wonderful, believe me. Another challenge about education and civil society is looking for alternatives to traditional education with a view to find new sources of motivation for students and avoid school desertion or the drop up. You must do that. In Argentina, each year, more and more students, especially in vulnerable communities, finish their studies because United Nations model gives them a reason to go ahead. One of the challenges to avoid cultural violence is to favor social cohesion for contributing to peace and mutual understanding. We should try that all people respect all cultures, traditions, religion, and different way of life. To this goal we need continuous work in the field. As Arisbe said in the previous intervention, with projects and educational campaigns. And this is a long-term task for civil society, and it must be a long-term policy for all governments. And finally, I think that civil society needs to work in a close partnership, closely with the state. We can speak about that later if you want. But we are convinced that if civil society organizations combine their effort instead of compete with each other, working together, as Nancy says, and pressure to still to fulfill its function, we can live in a more peaceful world. Because peace is a way of life, but it also a collective construction. Thank you again, Karim.
What role does the education play toward promoting peace in conflict and non-conflict contexts? And what are the challenges and difficulties of this?
Thank you, Karim. As Silvia said, we have to continue with our work, everyday work. I'm thinking it was very shocking to me to see what Arisbe showed us, to see how young people see themselves without hope or future, because, for example, do not have access to education, or they get involved in violent gangs as the only way of identity or the only way to have a family. So it's very shocking, I think, for us, for Silvia and for me, because we live in a non-violent area or region, but this is common in Latin America. So we must do something as civil society, as NGO, we must do something. I will jump in the challenges of this educational practice. Thinking about it, I divided into the government challenges that I think is the government challenges and the civil society challenges. So at the political level or government level, first of all, I think we must work toward more equal education outcome among young people from different socioeconomic levels, areas of the residence, racial, ethnic background. And in this COVID-19 situation, we realized that we need to ensure the, for example, Wi-Fi connection to all the students of the region. And this is not what happened here in Argentina, for example. We have a lot of youth population without any access to internet. So the impact directly in the way of the education that they receive. So it's very important now in this context, that connection that is always taken for granted, but it's not like that here in Argentina, for example. And in the political level, I think they have to complement progress in education with policies that reinforce the link between the transition from education to employment. So in conflict contexts, these challenges have to deal also with difficulties associated with controlling the level of violence and crime. That is often a common scenario. And also, like Arisbe said, the migration problem. So it's very complex a scenario to work. And at the civil society level, the challenges implementing this practice, for me, it's first of all to have policies that reinforce and support peace in non-formal education programs from civil society in order to have a better and sustainable impact in the society. And if it happens, also the challenge is to train not only students, but also teachers as peace builders. But many times the difficulty for training in peace is to change in the teacher perspective, or even the perspective of the political administration, the vision of what education really means, taking into account the vision of an entire humanity with shared values, with global citizenship education cares. I mean, it's important. Again, we need a deep debate regardless to what is relevant regarding education content. We need to look into a whole individual, not only a separate person. We have a brain, we have feelings, we have behavior, we have but we are not broken in pieces. We need to see individual as totality with different dimension in education. But we cannot expect solution to come only from the government. As a civil society, we must be a subject of transformation and hope. Working for peace education in non-conflict contexts is also a conflict prevention practice, and therefore a tool of strengthening Latin American democracy. So it's important the work we do as civil society every day. So, I mean, there are many challenges, but we have to continue working on it. Thank you, Karim.
Thank you, Nancy. Now, Arife, shortly, please, if you could answer, what does the role that education plays promoting peace in conflicts and non-conflict contexts, and what are the challenges and difficulties?
Okay, thank you, Karim, again. I think empowering youth is more important today than ever. Since Salvadorian society is going through the demographic bonus phase, that is the time frame during which the economically active population still exceeds economically dependent population. Investing more in the skill of young people is therefore urgent to maximize the social and economic benefit of this window of opportunity, which is expected to be open until 2035. Some NGOs and we in the church have taken 5 actions in attention to young people to help save this young generation, but knowing that what we achieve is little in the face of a very big problem. First, place with informal education. We educate with forums, workshops, conferences, and diplomas. And also, as a church, we evangelize with diaconal approach and individual well-being. Second, place with entrepreneurship. It is the support for young people to start a business initiative. They develop a small business and livelihood. Third, place with a scholarship for young people living in poverty who are studying basic, secondary, and university studies. Fourth, it has an important challenge, and it is necessary to take action with the promotion of dialogue. More than ever, at different levels of society, in attempt to create awareness on the rich people, decision makers, and relevant sectors. We call on society to find peaceful solutions to all conflict in dialogue and negotiation. Being a Christian church, we really on Gospel of St. Matthew 18, he says, is 18:15 to 17 says, if your brother or sister sin, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that very matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church, and if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan. That is a word of the Bible. Dialogue and involvement of young people in need. We need to raise awareness and think together how to build societies with less conflict and more dialogue in search of building peace with justice. Related to this, we have the encounter of 2 generations, another challenge, with the phenomenon called digital revolution. We are living the phase of the digital revolution, in which young people are the pioneers in that, and all through adults know many things, but compared to young people and digital world, they remain almost illiterate. Then there is the clash of 2 important generations. You have to learn from each other, as well as in other fields of the society. Fifth, other challenge is the family education. There are parents who think, in my country context, who thinks that the only 2 destinations for their children are, first, that they immigrate to United States to send remittance to help themselves financially, and the other, that their children be educated to family agricultural aid, farm work for a small business to subsist. Families need to have other perspectives on life based on values and according the trends of population, now preferring to live in the cities and not in countryside. Well, in general, I think that we have very important challenge. Thank you, Karin.
Thank you, Arisbe. Thank you so much. Now we are going to some of the questions that the public put on the chat box. There are 2 questions. I would like to make the mix because of the time. And from one side, they ask the strategies that could be of, do you think, that to reach to peace? And they ask specifically to Arisbe how to reintegrate kids that are working with the Maras into the educational system. On the other side, they ask how to teach young men and women how to create a self-esteem and self-confidence in order to promote, develop global peace as a main tool and as a main point in young men and women to develop themselves in a peace society. I don't know, would you like to start with these questions?
I can start.
Okay, well.
Perfect.
Okay. The first question was about strategies.
Strategies.
Okay,
strategies?
I think I mean, our programs we do with the youth population, we have a, I mean, it's important that consider education in non-conflict contexts as a tool to conflict prevention. I think we do everyday conflict prevention. As I say, we don't see the results immediately because it's not happened that way, but every day your work, I think that it's a conflict prevention for non to I mean, get down in the conflict situation, violent situation. So the role of education that we conceive is related to shaping the values of future generation. It's like a building collective conscious. See the skills to enact these values. So I think it's mainly the conflict prevention. And regardless to the second question about is the ways to create peace in order to different education, I think is I'm aware that here in Argentina, many schools with formal education has elective tasks that such as yoga or spiritual techniques for young people, for children, and that's okay, but it's in very little aspect of that. And I think it's important to take the human being as a whole, a comprehensive concept of education should take into account not only formal learning, but also behavior with others, how the children or how the youth have the behavior is, what is the, not only the brain, but the feeling. So our program education teach also spiritual values. So I think in that way we contribute to real education for peace and non-conflict context. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And now Silvia, or is very
yes.
shortly.
Yes,
would you like
shortly. Okay, very shortly. Well, I can complete the answer of Nancy, specifically in the question about strategy for peace, and in the specific case of United Nations model, I think that this project develops abilities and skills that improve possibility to get a better job in the future, no? Because it promotes research, reading, critical analysis, and the defense of different positions in different contexts, no? I always think that after participate in the United Nations model, they understand better how the world works and what are the main problems in the international scene. For example, the problem as maras, as Arisbe said here, no? Because it's raise awareness and commitment to world problem. No? Many young people decide to study career that they have never considered to study, such international relations, political science, international economy. And this is very important too, because they decide to continue studying. And many others give value to building consensus and dialogue and diplomacy as tools allow finding realistic and effective solutions to today's problems. You know? And many of other students consider or finish doing humanitarian work. And this is really, really, really important. You know? And finally, I think that the state, one word about the state, no? Because I think that the state has the strongest, highest responsibility to avoid structural and direct violence, no, because it must guarantee the necessary condition for all people to live with dignity, no. But civil society has a very important role to play in this, no, in promoting an education for peace and a culture of peace, no, an education that promotes for the base of society the values of human rights and respect and raise awareness about our work. Thank you, Karim.
Thank you, and I'll just 1 minute just
yes.
to say something.
I think some gangs members have managed to reintegrate through activities, learning opportunities. Not precisely the educational system. It's not possible yet, but they learn about some activity for reintegrate to a society. But there are organizations and churches that work on that. Some say the only way out to the gang is to convert in a Christian or some religions. It's not, I don't know, it's not true or false, but it's a motivational tool, the religions. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well. We finally came to the end of this session. I would like to say thanks again, Nancy Falcon, Silvia Perazo, and Arilina Gomez, for such a valuable contribution. We would like to say thanks again to the audience for your active participation. But before ending, I would like to emphasize that the input of this session will be influenced the G20 leaders' agenda, and the recordings and summaries of outcomes of the sessions will be progressed in the relevant G20 working groups, and the C20 communique will be submitted to the G20 presidency. We invite you all to attend other sessions taking place through the day and in the upcoming days. Do not forget to use the hashtag C20 Summit. By the way, members of civil society organizations can still register to become members of the C20 through the C20 website if they are interested. It was my greatest pleasure to be a moderator of this event. Thank you and stay safe.